hand it over for some State Bar meeting etiquette.
Vicki?
Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with a goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please type "I have a comment" or "I have a question" in the chat feature, and a message will be sent to the host. Alternatively, you can also use the raise hand feature. In efforts of transparency for those joining this public meeting, whether by phone or Zoom, we request that you refrain from having side conversations on chat about the content of the meeting. Again, the chat feature is utilized simply as a tool for you to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder that going forward, all Legal Services Trust Fund Commission and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. This is a video conference, and so please be aware of your surroundings behind you. For any tips for those using Zoom on a computer, when on mute, holding down the space bar will temporarily unmute you. If you use your phone to dial into the meeting, please be sure your computer's microphone is on mute to avoid any audio. And lastly, while joining, audio via computer is highly recommended. If an individual loses audio, they can call in separately using the Zoom conference number.
Thank you, Vicki.
All right, thank you. Thanks everybody for being here today. I actually think we can move through the agenda pretty quickly. I think the big time-consuming and work is ahead of us here in terms of meeting about the grants, but let's attack the agenda. And for that, let's first take roll, which Christine will do, and then I'll call for public comment, and then quickly thereafter get into it. So let's do roll so we get quorum.
Okay, great. Chris Schreiber.
Here.
Banashe Aglagi. All right. Amina Al-Saraf. Oh, there you go.
There he is.
Great. Herman DeBoats.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Eric Iskin.
Here.
Jim Meeker.
Here.
Rich Reines. Rich.
Here.
Great. And Kim Savage.
Here.
Great. All right. Check in with our liaisons. Selena Copeland. Bonnie Huff. And sorry, Devon, do we have new board of trustee liaisons?
We do, Christine Gonong, but I don't see her on right now.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't have the new ones on my list. All right, State Bar staff. Devon.
Here.
Christine Holmes, I am here. And Erica.
Here.
All right.
Okay. Is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment at this time or identify yourself?
I'm going to be taking place for Selena today.
Sorry, I hear something.
Hello, can you hear me?
Barely.
I'm just quickly trying to introduce myself. My name is Rihanna from LAC. I'm taking place for Selena today.
Ah, okay. Thanks, Brandon. All right, we will move on to the consent calendar. I need hopefully everybody had a chance to see that. We got to approve last meetings from the last minute, or the minutes from the last meeting, and I will take a motion and we'll take a vote on that.
So moved.
Thank you, Eric.
Moved.
Second.
Moved.
Thank you, Herman. All right.
All right, I'll call roll. Schreiber.
Yes.
Akalagi, Al-Saraf,
Yes.
DeBose,
Yes.
Iskin,
Yes.
Meeker,
Yes.
Rhinus,
Yes.
and Savage.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. All right.
All right,
Big meat of the meeting.
move us forward. Okay, so this might have been kind of forgotten since everything else that this committee is working on. But if you recall way back in August when we met, we briefly discussed the mid-cycle report, mid-cycle expenditures report that grantees were going to complete for the 2019 and 2020 EAF homelessness prevention grant that went out, and we extended the deadline from August 31st to October for this report. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, and that's what the memo and the spreadsheet were about. So let me move forward. So this report, and let me provide just a little bit more background. This is not the typical report that we require of grantees, but as you remember, for this particular grant, grantees had to spend down the entirety of their grant by June 30th, 2021, or they would have to return the funds, and not to a pot that we could redistribute later. We would have to completely return the funds. So we wanted to ensure that the funds were completely spent down and services were provided. So if a grantee wasn't on track to spend down, we wanted to find that out sooner rather than later and reallocate those funds to grantees that could use the money and spend it down by June 30th. But again, this isn't the regular type of report that we ask them for. So it was a little bit of a challenge. We did have a webinar after we released the report to explain how to fill it out. I think if this was a typical year, we would have seen maybe a handful of explanations for why they were projecting something different expenses going forward. But as we know, this hasn't been a typical year. And even with the extension and hoping that maybe September expenses would look a little bit more typical than if we had used expenses from July to do a projection. But that wasn't necessarily the case for most of the grantees. So that is, with that, just a reminder that the State Bar did a projection based on September expenses that the grantees reported, multiply that by the remainder of the months of the grant period to determine if grantees were on track. So grantees could either agree with that projection, or they could provide their own method and rationale for how they thought they would be able to expend the remainder of their grant. And as I mentioned, the reason for this was to determine if they were on track and also determine if they were in a position to accept funds that we could reallocate. And as included in the memo, on the report, we asked specifically grantees if they were going to be in a position to accept additional funds. And in addition to them answering that question, we could see how they were projecting to expense the rest of their funds and make sure that they were not claiming to return funds, and also saying that they could accept additional funds. Okay, so I want to move into the explanation narratives. So as I kind of explained, in a given year, I don't think we would have, a typical year, I don't think we would have seen as many explanations as we saw this year. As you noticed, almost all of the grantees had to explain some sort of deviation. And a lot of some of the themes that we were seeing, as we have seen with the budget revisions and carryovers, we were seeing with this expense report as well. The use of payroll protection loans, delays in hirings, pause in services, and then also a lot of changes in non-personnel items, especially travel. Most grantees are not having staff travel at this time, so those funds were reallocated, and a lot of the time those funds were reallocated to technology because grantees had to pivot to provide services and ramp up their own infrastructure, typically in technology. So just like the budget revisions and carryovers for the other grants, that's what we were seeing here. But we did see, as you could see in the spreadsheet, that grantees did have reasonable explanations for how they would spend down these funds. And additionally, we've had conversations with grantees, and they know that as a community, it will not look good if we have to return funds. And they know that I guess I would say as a community, they want to expend these funds. And if they didn't feel that they could, they would have reported that. And I think we feel strongly about that, which is part of the reason why we are suggesting approving all of the explanations. But I do want to open it up if people had specific questions. And there were, sorry, before I open it up to specific questions, I did want to note, there were 2 organizations that I needed to provide an update about. Legal assistance for the elderly. They had not provided their explanation yet when we posted these materials, but we've spoken with them and they have now revised their report, and their situation, like others, was that they received a payroll protection loan and spent it first. And I know we didn't include in our spreadsheet the amount of the grants, but they received just over $50,000. And it was all going towards personnel, and we don't have any concerns about their ability to spend down the entirety of that grant. And the other grantee was Legal Aid Society of San Diego. And we followed up with them because they reported that they would be returning some funds both for their formula and RFP grants, but they also indicated that they were in a position to accept additional funds. So we wanted to reach out to them to see if they had any questions about what we were trying to determine from these reports, and that we weren't going to reallocate funds if they weren't going to be able to expend their current funds. And so there was a little bit of a confusion there, and they did revise their report to show that they would actually spend down the funds, but they were they had to change some of their line items because they were going to spend a little bit more in technology than they had budgeted. So they did need to revise, and they were not going to return funds. So I did note in the memo that that was a possibility. So those the amount that will be redistributed is slightly different, but those numbers were also included in the memo. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Anybody have questions? Okay, thank you, Christine. That was really helpful.
So just moving along with that, also included in the memo, just as a reminder that we had originally allocated $250,000 to Legal Aid Society of San Bernardino, but that was rescinded. So that is an amount that needs to be redistributed, which is why the return funds for RFP is a little bit higher. These funds, as I just noted, are going to be, the amounts are going to be slightly different because of Legal Aid Society of San Diego. But it's by just about 2,000 and 4,000, so it's not incredibly different. But what we do need to make a decision as a committee about is how we want to redistribute the returned RFP funds. As noted in the memo, the formula funds will be redistributed the same way that they were allocated in the first place, except it would be only towards the programs that are in a position to receive additional funds. So that's not something that's spelled out in the statute, so we don't have to vote on that. But we do have two options for how we can redistribute the funds, the return funds. The first option is to redistribute based on a proportionate share of the competitive grant funds. This is the option that staff recommends. It seems the most equitable because it's based on their original distribution. So depending on the percentage that they received from that original distribution, we would take the total amount of return funds and find out that percentage, and that's what the program would receive. The other option is to do it more evenly. Well, sorry, not more evenly, but to split it evenly. But we don't recommend this because it doesn't really take into account the actual project, the size of the project and the program. But it is an option before the committee. So I'll open it up to discussion at this point.
This is Jim. I got a question.
Yeah.
On option one, when you redistribute it proportionally, what about those agencies that are returning a lot of money, say like the Inland Counties Legal Services that I guess are returning over 154,000? Would they get reallocated their proportional amount, or do you subtract that 154,000 in calculating their proportion?
No, sorry, that's a good question. So only the grantees that indicated that they were in a position to receive a reallocation. So one, in addition to saying that they were in a position, they, on our part, when we were reviewing, we also had to, we also wanted to confirm that they weren't returning funds. If they were returning funds, they're not in a position to receive additional funds. So it's only a select number of grantees. It's not all of the grantees.
So Jim, we do then a proportionate share from the competitive grants that are eligible. So it's not from the original percentage. It's just from the current, the current pool that are in a position to receive funding. And the other, I guess, detail to this is if we are going to redistribute to existing competitive grants, we wouldn't be distributing more than what they asked for. I don't think there's any in that position, but we haven't gone back to check that because I do believe from memory that there were quite significant cuts to all the grants, but we wouldn't give them more than what they have originally asked for because the statute actually doesn't provide for that type of redistribution. But I don't think any of them are in that situation. But just just wanted to note that.
Okay, sounds good.
Anybody else? Okay.
All right.
We want to take a vote?
Yeah, we could do a vote now if.
I think that was uncontroversial. It's good to have that.
Should we do these together? Is that, this is both for the narrative explanations and how we would redistribute.
I don't feel strongly, to be honest, but I don't know if there's a better protocol. I don't know if the next one is going to engender any different thing. Why don't we move to item B, and then if it looks like we need to break up the votes, we can.
Well, do you want to vote on these two motions first? And I think it's up your call, Chris. I mean, they're not controversial, so I think it's up to you call.
I'll move that we so move as indicated on the screen.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll second.
All right. Further discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Okay, great. Shriver,
Yes.
Blackie, Alsara,
Yes.
DeBose,
Yes.
Iskin,
Yes.
Meeker,
Yes.
Rhinus,
Yes.
and Savage.
Yes.
Motion passes.
I guess just also to add logistically how we're going to do this is we're aiming to distribute funds for January 2021. So we're working backwards right now. You know, it's actually not that much money to distribute across all grantees. So I'm hoping if we ever have future legislation that there won't be this like forced spend down date, because it's just very difficult for grantees and for us to go and do this mid-cycle redistribution to ensure that they're spent down. But we will be contacting grantees very shortly. They're all anxious to know if it's a small amount or a large amount, because if it's a large amount, they would need to hire, but it's going to be a small amount you know, across all the programs. And then Brady and I are going to draft, it's going to be a separate grant agreement to then send out to them for this additional funding.
Don, what do you mean by small amount? What's the?
It's not going to break out to be that much because it's 500,000 between formula and we haven't ran the formula because we needed you to approve it, but it's not going to be that much because there are over 50 programs that are receiving funding. So it's not going to make a huge difference. It'll be helpful, but it's not going to make a huge difference. And then, you know, like Christine said, programs know that you know, we're giving them a lot of trust in their expenditures report and being flexible in the approval. I do suspect that even at the end of the period, there probably going to be some type of unspent funds, would be my guess, even if it's a small amount. And at that point, we may reach back out to the legislation to see if they said they wouldn't process extension requests last year. They would do it in the year of the funding expires. So we may reach out to them to see. I mean, it kind of depends on how large it is and whether we want to make that request, given that we have the other HP fund. So at that time, we'll work with Chris to see what might be the best strategic move.
Yeah, certainly they should be encouraged to be creative to get nominal amounts of funds spent down. You know, if there's not, yeah, okay.
But we don't have another mechanism to check. It'll be the next time would be their end of the year expenditures report. And then we would go back and do a sweep to see if they've spent down the entirety of their fund. And that would already be too late. So yeah, I think right now it's just a decision whether we need to go back to the legislature and say, we don't know if there's not going to be, but if the event, should we, and the thing is, I don't think there's going to be a large amount, if that, so we might not want to do that. But yeah, Chris, we can confer and see what you think.
So when you say small amount, are you saying 10,000, 50,000?
I just don't know, but there's always unspent funds every year. So it would be great if they spent it all down. That's hard to imagine though, with this many programs, that would happen. And if it does, it's great. It's just the nature having done this, and there's always unspent amounts with IOLT and EF, any of our discretionary grants.
Yeah, but it's not going to be $1 million collectively.
No.
It'll be six figures that collectively among.
Yeah. Oh yeah, at most. I'm thinking like probably collectively less than 100,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be a small amount.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm not sure if it would be worth it to ask for an extension at that point. Maybe we just remit the funds then back to the state.
Yeah, I mean, Herman's point is, I think, or question is like directed to an optics, the importance of some of the optics here, which is if you've got like $2 million here, but manager's going to raise an eyebrow. So we obviously don't want that. I mean, it's a thing for an organization to say, hey, like, I've got $960 that, you know, didn't come through because they quit 13 days earlier or something like that.
Yeah.
Will we get our hands spanked if we send back $100,000?
I don't think so. I think that's such a small amount. I don't think so, given that, you know, there's still the moratoriums on evictions, there's still court closures. I don't think so, but, and and the thing is, we're working closely with LAC, and we've been in communication with the programs, and we've told them, we're gonna, the commission is probably leaning towards approving it. We can't guarantee it. If and if they do, we want you to give us an update, even if you're not required to, if you don't think that you're gonna spend it down.
Okay.
And we have a really good working relationship with programs, and so I think they know. It's just, sometimes it's out of their control.
Yeah, less is more.
With the return of the least amount of funds possible, and an explanation, sorry. Hang on, I'm sorry. It's my daughter calling from the UK. I'm trying to tell her I'm not free. Okay, so there will be an explanation as to why funds are being returned. What is the possibility of having those go into the next funding? Like that, I don't know. I'm just wondering if anybody knows whether those are funds that can go forward.
It's kind of delicate. I haven't talked to the legislature about this extension. It's a little bit delicate in that we want to ask for more money, but then we say we can't spend it down. So it's
right. So it just, okay, got it. Makes sense.
Have we had to send money back before?
No, we've never had this type of hard spend down deadline provision like this. So no.
Okay.
That's actually an important fact, I think.
It's very
that
important.
Has just raised. I mean, that's a really good statement, I think.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a disconnect, and obviously there's a need, and we're in a pandemic, and we know the wave of evictions, but in terms of getting out funds really quickly and the spending down, there's a little bit of a disconnect. But I think this is a good learning lesson. I think if we ever have any input on legislation like this, we should not have that hard spend down deadline.
Okay.
I don't know though. That's kind of a little bit out of our control, but yeah, LAC's aware of it. Our executive management is aware of it. So.
Anybody else? All right, Christine.
Okay, so moving on to the budget revision requests. So there were a number of budget revisions.
It's so tiny.
Yeah, sorry. There were a number of budget revision requests, quite a few actually, but then running the numbers, there were quite a few that were under 10%. And then as noted in the meeting materials, there were a number that were between the 10 and 25% that are approved by staff. So it ended up only being 3 organizations that had over the 25% that needed approval by the committee and commission. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at this. We recommend approving, and again, very similar to all of the other budget revision requests that we've received, just showing flexibility during this time with needing to move around items in the budget based on the response to COVID. So nothing stood out as being problematic to us, but if you have any questions.
I was just taking another look here, but if anybody has any questions, please type in. And Christine, nothing anything you want to highlight, or Dwan or anybody in terms of the revisions?
No, I mean, they're very, you know, as you've seen from the last commission meeting, they're all COVID related, you know,
Yeah.
disruption in services, nothing to us that wouldn't warrant approval and flexibility. So.
I mean, I think, was anything not COVID related?
No, the one thing, you know, and I kind of touched on it briefly, it is COVID related, but we also talked about this at the commission level. Just sometimes it's hard to hire. So I do think, you know, it's harder to hire at this moment too. But that is, you know, I think something that we have seen before as well.
But we were encouraged by the last commission meeting about the conversation about hiring, and so there are some thoughts that we can share with the executive committee and perhaps bring back to the commission on that.
So the only question I had was the last line item here in the spreadsheet, page, the next page there, Christine, if you can scroll down, at least on my copy on the State Bar posted site.
Is there a larger?
Oh, the actual spreadsheet.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, let me pull that up.
This is Riverside Legal Aid number line item 11.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Oop, sorry. Sorry, just 1 second.
Okay.
Pulling up the wrong one.
It's on, for the committee members, it's on page 14 of the materials that were attached to the State Bar website agenda.
Oh, I see what you're, that we need further explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is under staff approval, and we're still in touch with Riverside.
So what happens, I guess, in terms of this particular line item?
So you're not approving, you don't approve the ones under 25%. The staff have authority to approve it. So they need to submit additional information, and then we can make a decision. And at the next HP committee meeting, whenever that is, we'll report out on that particular line item. Okay,
so that was my question. So so the 3 line items above the line, above the informational purposes line, is what we're actually voting on.
Yes,
correct.
But we always provide the information, the ones that you're not approving, in case you might have questions. And you know, I think that would go to more like structural things. Like if we were doing something like there was a pattern of behavior that whether you agreed or you disagreed with staff, we provide that, so we have oversight over that. But yeah, those decisions are already made.
But to the extent that staff might say no, then we would then address that at the next meeting.
Well, I think we talk about it more systemically. At that point, we would have already, since we the new policy, the board says that we have authority to approve up to 25%. So we would have already let the programs know that we don't approve it. But you know, I would say that hasn't happened, any of the ones under 25%. And if it's a close call, we actually would probably come to the committee and ask for your opinion before we made that type of determination. But technically, we don't need to ask for your approval because we have the authority under 25%.
Okay. Anybody, any questions on this list? You good? All right, let's take a vote.
All right, let me just,
And do we have the do you have the resolution there or the motion?
yeah, let me just pull that back up 1 second.
Sorry.
Do you see the motion now? Am I sharing the right screen?
You are.
Okay, good.
Does everybody see it?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay.
So moved.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Let's take the vote.
Okay, Schreiber,
Yes.
Aklagi, Al-Saraf,
Yes.
DeBose,
Yes.
Iskin,
Yes.
Meeker,
Yes.
Rhinus,
Yes.
and Savage.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. All right.
So
Last item.
yeah, we wanted this somewhat as a placeholder if we wanted, if the committee had things that they wanted to talk about, but also just a reminder. I think everybody's pretty aware of this, but we have the upcoming meeting on December 3rd, the longer meeting where we're going to talk about all of the RFP proposals, and hopefully we'll be able to make our recommendations that would then go to the full commission at the December 15th meeting. And we are on track to have the meeting materials posted before the Thanksgiving holiday, because it's a lot of meeting materials for everyone.
Oh, but it's a lot. But can I say a little bit about the meeting materials? Because it's going to seem like a lot, but you're not going to have to review everything. A lot of that is for reference. And we'll include this in the email as well. There's a very short memo, 2 or 3 pages, that really just like recaps the review process and then gives you a little bit of some other things to think about. We're trying to kind of get data so that you have a little bit more formal data in terms of like what counties might be the hardest hit by evictions or COVID. You know, it's hard to say because, you know, the wave of evictions hasn't come, but there are some think tanks that have, I guess, taken the number of households that have lost a job due to COVID, and then layer that on with the number of renters in a particular county to give some type of gauge of how a certain community is impacted by it. So we'll share that data with you just so you have a sense of, you know, the areas in the state. And, you know, nothing's going to be surprising. It's the rural areas. Obviously, there's the large, really dense counties like Los Angeles and San Francisco that, you know, already have been reporting increasing evictions. We don't know what the numbers are going to be next year. So, you know, there are those general trends that I'm sure that you can already glean anecdotally that, you know, we're trying to give you some hard data to you know, as you make your determinations. I do have a process question for you because, you know, the big grant committee, usually we go through each one of these proposals one by one, even though there's already, it's like already staggered and, you know, kind of the grouping that's in the high category and the mediums and the lows, you know, because we've had so many kind of meetings within our working group. I wonder if that's not the best way to approach this, given that it's a scoring rubric, given that, you know, there are firm scores, given that, you know, there's so much more in requests than we have, that might not make the best use of our time to go through, like, I say the bottom half or so. We're still kind of getting numbers from each program, but that's, you know, a process question for you, for the group, so that you can help us as we plan and work with Chris to plan.
Let me ask a question. Using the rubric, you have worked with the majority of your staff who work. What is the range of scores? Is there a significant number of scores between 90 and 100? Between 85 and 100?
We're still getting scores from all the working groups. All the working groups have actually not concluded their scoring. They're having still ongoing meetings to finalize. But I would say programs that are 90 plus have a good chance of getting probably a grant. And and I say good chance because it's going to depend on how much you want to fund some of these projects.
Sure.
You saw some of the proposals are like 2 million, 1 million. So depending if you go really high, you're only going to be able to fund a few. If you wanted to reduce funding for some of these projects, you'll be able to fund more. So I guess that's a kind of a policy question that the committee probably may need to spend a little bit of time talking at the beginning to think in what direction you want to go in terms of more. And we have this discussion all the time with the big grant committee whenever we do awards. Do you want to fund a lot of projects or do you want to fund just a few that have high impact? But given that, you know, we said that we wanted to fund big projects, I would say we don't want to fund too many to dilute the impact of those individual projects that we do fund, but what's kind of the balance? And, you know, some projects, I think if you guys had a chance to look at the budget, you could probably launch the project with a lot less or less, you know. So there probably will be some cuts, and that's what staff is doing right now. We're trying to come up with a low range and a high range for each project proposal. So a low range, given the limited funding, what's the absolute minimum that this project can get off the ground, and then a high range with all the bells and whistles, but not wasteful. So that you have some number to start the conversation.
So Dwan, just to answer your question, my suggestion would be that we spend our time focusing on the proposals that the working groups are advocating be funded. And of course, leave it open for questions if anybody has any questions about the ones that are not recommended for funding. But I suggest that we focus on those that are recommended for funding primarily, instead of going line by line through each one of them.
Yeah, I think, Chris, did you have that same suggestion you're working with? I think I thought I heard Dan say that too.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, Jim, I would encourage you to talk. We've had several robust conversations. Yes. I guess my feeling was that, to Eric's point, like we just had, time will restrict the amount we're going to be able to spend on talking about programs. And I just think if we're talking about programs that are, you know, well below in the rankings, we just should spend our time having the conversation, you know, about the ones at the top.
So
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that for Rich and I, we scored them, but we didn't make a specific statement, fund or don't fund. We could go back and do that, I think, obviously with Rich's agreement, or you can get, I mean, if you give us a numeric score, that may or may not be the best way to do it. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about it that long, but well, I mean, there's such a variation in scoring.
But you're a little, I mean, I wouldn't say tied to the score, but because we have a rubric, and that's why, you know, you can modify obviously the score. The score that from each working group, I think, is a starting point. And then once you meet as a larger group, the committee, you can modify that score. But at the end of the day, if there's a program that's at a 50, another program that's at 95, you can't just bring up the program at a 50 and say you want to fund them. If
no, okay. So what I'm suggesting is we just didn't say fund or don't fund. We put a score on each one of ours, but we could certainly go back and do a thumbs up or thumbs down. Rich, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I think our scoring evidences our desire to fund a project or not fund a project. Those that scored the highest, obviously, are programs that we felt strongly about, but we only looked at 10 programs.
Right.
And we have to see the entirety and how the other groups scored their programs in order to make a decision as to whether or not a program we scored at 91 ought to be funded, when if we go below 92, we're spreading the money too thin. So
yes. So our recommendation that you'll see in the memo is that like the highest grouping, if people have time, then you should look at it so that there's some uniformity when we discuss, because it's very difficult that you're reviewing them in your own batches. but you know, the thing is that the low scoring programs, they're kind of, they don't really have a shot because we have such limited funding that's why I do agree, concentrate our efforts on that top tier. But it's hard to talk in specifics unless you've looked at the application. What we've done to help aid you also is what we call we pull profile sheets. And what that means is we pull, you know, the relevant pieces of the application that we think is the most important, project abstract and the budget, so that you don't have to reread the whole application. You have this like 2-pager that you can review from each of the top tier projects.
So are you suggesting when we come on December 3rd, we come with our list of 10 and identify those that—
Well, there'll already be a list of 10. What we're going to organize is we're collecting the scores from all the groups, and then it'll be in descending order. So you'll see like the top 10 or 15.
Okay, okay, all right.
If you're amenable, is to just review at the very least minimum the profile sheet. So it'll be, you know, if it's 10 programs, an additional 20 pages, just so that you have some background. I think it's hard to listen to another commissioner summarize it without having actually read it, because, you know, we're biased now, right? You're presenting on it. It's already at the top. You've already liked it. And so I think that might give it some objectivity, but you know, that's just our proposal. And that's why we want to have a conversation with you. It's the first time we've done a scoring rubric. So we're actually having a hard time in the design of it and discussion of it.
So if I give an agency a 50, do we as a group need to write some justification so when that agency comes back to you, you can say this is why the commissioners thought you got a 50?
No, you don't need to write a justification. All our meeting materials are public, so they're going to see that scoring sheet, and they're going to see what we provide is 2 spreadsheets for you that you'll see coming next week. One is it'll have like you know, the programs and the total scores in descending order, and then it'll have like, you know, geographic area, and then we have a more drilled down spreadsheet of like the actual tally scoring for each working group broken down by each category. So the thing is, programs are going to see it. They're curious about their scores. They see all the meeting materials. I don't think you need to. There are occasionally programs that come back to us and it's like, hey, how come you only gave us, we thought we had an excellent proposal, but we only got 20. Or, you know, we never done a scoring rubric before, but they, you know, I could see them coming and saying that. And then at that point, if staff has enough information, we'll pass it on. If they require a little bit more detail, then we might come back to the working group and ask you.
So Jim, go ahead. And then I want to address that issue as it came up in our meeting. I think Elizabeth provided helpful comments about that. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I have a couple suggestions. At least for the next time around, I would think I would have each of the scores rated as, we did this on the bank grants before, as high, medium, and low, in addition to the numbers, because my high might be a 95, where Chris's high might be 100. And so at least you have this broader classification of high priority funding, medium, that could be reconsidered, and then low that won't be considered. And 2, when you have the sheet that you're summarizing these from high to low based on the total scores, it would be nice for me to have also a running total in terms of how much money totally is being requested, so that when we're running down the sheet, we can see once we get beyond 20 million or whatever,
you have that.
We're not going to, you have that accumulative. And then the final thing on the information, I talked a little bit to Dan about this on the homeless, or the housing crunch, the median income, the number of housing units below that, and so on. It would be nice, in order to judge rural versus non-rural, that you use the classification of counties that we published in the Access to Justice report on the rural housing crisis on Appendix A, where we classify counties as either purely rural, mixed as either mainly rural, some urban, or mainly urban, some rural, and then pure urban counties. That would be helpful.
Just Jim, just quickly in response to that, you know, that spreadsheet that Dan was working on with you, I don't think we're going to share it with the committee, because what Jim and Dan were working on was pulling the number of renters below 125% in each county to kind of give you an idea of how many potential evictions there would be. But we thought that then we found some data from the Turner Center, the UC Berkeley think tank, that layers, that's what I was talking about earlier, that layers the loss of income from a household related to COVID on top of the renter income. And we thought that might be kind of a stronger indication of a potential impact in a particular community. So
But
I
is
think
is that data by county, or is it
that
by?
data is by county. The data is by county.
And so my request is to group the counties according to that.
Yeah. So we'll do
scheme
that.
in Appendix A.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So I see Rich has a comment as well. Rich, you want to go before me? Because I'm going to try to tie a few things that have been said. So.
Well, we may have covered it, Chris, but I just want to make sure that I understand. We are governed by the same geographic spread that IALTA money is governed by, and EAF money, I assume, in terms of reaching every county. And that's a question.
No.
And the other question was, should we be influenced by the focus of any of these proposals on a particular demographic?
I guess I might defer to Brady on the first one. My understanding is no, because it was a scoring item and not a statutory restriction. And then my answer on the second question that you asked is, I think that's the natural consequence of discretion. Like, we're going to end up privileging particular programs in particular communities. The only ones that I thought made it into the scoring process, though, were sort of rural and undocumented. So, and obviously unique, which is broad enough to sort of capture the discretion that I was talking about. So, you know, if somebody was capturing, I don't know, an underserved community in a very unique way, they might score higher on that particular item. Certainly rural and undocumented were the two. So, you know, just to follow up on a couple of things, one of which Herman talked about, and then and we had a long discussion. So Elizabeth said something that I think was helpful to be reminded of. And that was, if the max score is on a particular category is 30, and the program is present at the meeting and they got a 20, the question will then be posed by the program to the bar: why didn't I get a 30, number one, and what can I do to get a 30? And so the issue is that we're going to end up, you know, having to answer that. And so effectively what we end up with is like a rationale that has to be sort of articulated. But to me, like, and this goes down to Jim's point, this idea of you know, being in different groups and sort of learning the rubric process, I think is really important. I think our group was somewhat harsh in terms of how we interpreted what our role was in applying the rubric. I think Jim and I both saw this in some respects as a grading on the curve. So if one program got a perfect score, then it was likely that other programs that didn't do it as well would not get a perfect score. And I think we may have been alone in that regard. So, you know, we were looking at this like, well, 20 out of 30 is a C minus or whatever, or 22 is a C minus. And that's not terrible, but that reflected sort of where programs fell among the 10 that we reviewed. And obviously, without the benefit of the additional, with the full set of program applications, you just can't know. So, you know, where yours fits in on the curve. So anyway, that's, you know, just something to consider. Yeah. And I think we got to work through that, but we should definitely be prepared to sort of defend why certain programs didn't capture our attention or privilege. Oh, sorry, one last thing. The very first program I reviewed was a program that was intended to address tractable homelessness problems. And it was, I'll say, expensive for the number of clients served. And I think like, there's nothing wrong with that program. Like everybody was operating in the sort of quadrant of helping the universe. And so it's a matter of ranking. And I think, you know, from my perspective, the question that I posed in our small group was, you know, look, I'm not saying that these cases are not extremely labor intensive. I think the question is really like, what is our bang for the buck for this particular, you know, RFP funding? And I concede I might be alone in thinking we should be trying to serve more people, let's say.
No, we do the same thing. That's an excellent point. And we actually in our group did the same thing. Like there are projects that are suggesting serving 6,000 clients versus some that said 100. I mean, yeah, I think that's a great way to approach it.
No, I mean, I looked very closely at that. I don't know. I can't recall if Rich was so. I think that in our group, we went through rather quickly because we had a similar analysis on many of them. And I mean, I personally could articulate a rationale for my scoring on each one of them. The one thing I will say, which I forgot to say in our small group, was I didn't comb over the budgets, you know, and look at like salaries and things like that. I did look at whether there was any funding allocated for litigation. That was very important to me. And in most instances, I saw there wasn't. But I just want to acknowledge that for me, I didn't get into the weeds on the budget. I was really focused on the substance of the project and then applying the rubric to it. But I think Chris's analysis, I mean, that aspect of analysis, I think is really important. I think that's part of what our mission is, to look at what, you know, what is the impact, and is the amount they're asking for based on what they describe as what they intend to do. Does that make sense? There were some that what the number of clients they said they were going to serve, and when there were sub-grantees and the amount they asked for was just really so out of whack for me. So
Kim, let me ask you a question. You say the impact, using the rubric, it's 40, 30, 10, 10, 5, 5. Which category do you rate higher to say what's the impact?
For the 40 was sort of my sense.
40.
I mean, yeah, because and I will say that I didn't give any, I don't want to take up too much time, but I didn't give any program a perfect score. But
we came close, Kim. There were a couple that were.
We did have a couple that were close.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, pardon?
I said, that's encouraging. We didn't get there.
Our group had a really good set, Chris. That's the other thing about it. Sorry to cut you off, Kim. Go ahead.
No. The mix of personalities and perspectives obviously, you know, has a big impact. And people come with different backgrounds and kind of things they favor more certain approaches. So, I mean, it's a really interesting process. I found it extremely difficult. And really difficult for me since I know half those people and worked with them. But I think it's really tough, even if you don't have any, you know, personal connections. I think what the staff did in creating that rubric was really helpful, really helpful.
But this suggests the next time around, the rubric, instead of having 40 points in quality, perhaps carve off 15 for impact or bang for buck or relationship of the budget.
I agree with you, Jim. I think this rubric was a good starting point, but Now that
We
we're
moved a lot into the first category, I guess.
yeah, that 40 category probably should have been 60, and maybe we could have itemized it more. I agree with you, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, I want to be clear, like, I don't believe that like the bang for the buck is a universally held, you know, objective truth. Like somebody could score quite highly the spending, you know, a lot of money to resolve intractable cases. That could be, somebody could think that that is a really great plan. I didn't, but which isn't to say that somebody couldn't. And then I think that's part of where the discussion will lie, is when we meet, is to say like we ended up liking the programs that were sort of broader based or would serve more individuals or whatever. I think the other thing that we observed, at least in our group, is that we, you know, as a general matter, the question of whether it was a binary or a sliding scale was something that came up sort of repeatedly. So for example, if you served undocumented individuals, did you get a full score, like 100% on that category? Jim made the point, it's one thing to say that they're eligible, it's another thing to say we're taking the following steps as part of our proposal to reach this community. And that, like, clearly, I credit Jim for this, like that is something that to me is worth a higher score. So I think there were several things like, you know, that sort of fit into that category of not being a binary, you know, yes, you get 100% or no. And I'm not sure that was consistent across all the groups, but in any event, we'll address much of this, I think, in the broader committee. But it's been very interesting. I think we've learned a lot about how to use the rubric. And I will continue to advocate for discretion within the rubric, because I think ultimately the wisdom, experience, and good intentions of the committee members and the commissioners has to really be allowed to come through. I think like our desire to reduce everything to a number in some ways is understandable for transparency reasons, but I think we cannot always do that. And so discretion and fairness and equity sometimes all go hand in hand.
Chris, Amin has a comment.
Yeah, so Chris, sort of building on your point, one of the things that we discussed and that I struggled with a little bit had to do with how we approach support centers in contrast to QLSPs, because for some of the, I think for impact, that's part, you know, that's one element of it, but the sort of unique, the specific thing that I struggled with was when you look at, for example, undocumented, right? That category for the most part has been binary, but where it's not an organization that's providing direct legal services, how do you categorize that, right? And if there isn't a way for them to explain how ultimately their services that go to QLSPs who may or may not, I mean, at least the ones that we were looking at, I'm thinking of one in particular, didn't have a mechanism to do that. So do they get docked for not being able to present that category? So, which is built into the statute, right? That's a preference that's called out by the legislature. And I took the view, and maybe I'm a little bit harsh, but I took the view, if that's something that's been called out and that's something that we're looking at in terms of getting services to those communities, then I think, yeah, they should be docked for that, because ultimately the goal of this money is to go to a particular place and a particular service. So I don't know if you guys if anybody else faced that same issue. And I think it's a little bit difficult because support centers are expressly included in the legislation elsewhere and as a whole, but they're in a different category somewhat.
We did address that. We had one support center that comes to mind. I think they're highly qualified, but they're maybe it is just the case that the reality of these RFPs or of these applications, they offer a less compelling story for how to spend this money, because they're just going to be doing sort of fundamentally different things. And, you know, one other way to think about your point, I mean, is are they being docked, or are they not are they not able to tell as compelling a story? Jim and I talked about this. Like, do you get bonus points if you're sort of, there's no real way to do that in that current rubric.
I guess they're not getting preference, whereas other organizations are getting preference. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the category related to do they provide service to immigrants, that's where they suffered.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say that several of us were in a meeting with 3 support center attorneys last year that did not get bank grant funding, which I think it was the correct decision, but they were obviously really upset. And what they said to us loudly and very clearly is that we should consider a different analysis when dealing with support centers. Now, our group just recently gave a very high score to a support center, which wrote we thought, a really terrific proposal. But they did bring this up, and they are the heavy hitters, these 3 offices that we met with. And so maybe that is a discussion we need to have. I mean, we did tell them we would bring their concerns forward. So if we haven't done it before, I'm doing it now.
Yeah, I think it's a really excellent point, because I think when people talk about IALTA organizations and the general impression of legal aid is the direct services, the support centers, we all understand what support centers, but it's a different beast. There's not a great understanding of support centers, so they do sometimes get left behind. It's an important discussion, though.
This is Rich. Sorry, Chris.
No.
Go ahead. There are 2 things that are troubling me. One is the justification for our scoring and the notion of black box versus transparency. And Rianne, I hope you're listening to this, because feedback from LAC would be useful for me anyhow. But when we scored these, there were different groups scoring them using their own subjective notions of which programs wrote the best proposals, and there's no objective criterion, despite the rubric's effort at making it objective, that is uniform to the point where when we have to explain why a group got a 20 instead of a 30 or a 36 instead of a 40, we can articulate it with consistency from proposal to proposal. It puts us, I think, as an organization and individually at risk making statements that would not be upheld, subjected to an appropriate amount of scrutiny, like 3 lawyers from 3 support centers, as Kim pointed out. On the other hand, black box decision making is very troublesome, and I think inconsistent with our legislative mandate and the way we've approached our decision making over time. So I'm troubled about this. I would say in our defense, this is a one-off, maybe our first go round on this sort of thing, and we're learning what the pitfalls are as we try to implement the system. But I'm concerned about being put on the grill for the experimentation that this first go round required. And the second thing I would think, and sort of my friendship with Herman compels me to say this, and that is there's a systemic bias in looking at these proposals. And that is the bigger, the better organizations with the deeper staff and the more experience write the better proposals. And we're moved by them because systemically they know how to do it and they do it better, and they provide us with information. They ring bells they know have been successful in the past, and that perpetuates their receiving higher grades than the others. And I feel at a loss for falling into that systemic bias. And I wonder if we could address that in some way. I don't know how, but if staff is so close to this, it would be helpful to hear from staff that even though a proposal sounded crude or rough or omitted certain things, that it's worthy of greater consideration than we might otherwise give it.
Yeah, and I mean, you make excellent points, Rich. I think you identified really the difficulty with using a scoring rubric. And I think that the way we split it up in terms of just each group only reviewing a fourth of it is problematic. I mean, if you guys had all the time in the world and you didn't have your other day jobs, I think everybody should just review the whole set. I mean, that would probably be the more fair way of reviewing these RFPs, but it's just not feasible. It's not practical to have every committee member review 40. We did as a staff to give you that, like, you know, consistency, but it's very time consuming. I just don't know how feasible that is. The other thing I'll say though, we're the only grant maker I know of that does grant making like this in a public setting. People use scoring rubrics, but they don't have their meetings and their deliberations for the world to see. So it does layer on a level of difficulty for us. And it's not that it's not fair, but it makes it hard for us. Yeah. But with that said, I don't think we should be bound by any of the scores that are in the spreadsheet. I think this is why we'll have a meeting. You can modify that. You have discretion to modify that. So you're not bound to that. That's a starting point. If you think that one group gave a 20, but when you're reviewing it, oh no, that should be, then this is, you know, we're all advocates. You advocate up or down. So I think you still have that discretion, Chris.
I'm going to go back and say that if you give us an organization a low score, you need to be able to write why you did that, because those are the ones that are going to complain. When I was teaching, if somebody got a D or an F, I knew they were going to come knocking on my door, and I knew I needed to be able to say, Don, you got that D because of. If you got an A, you aren't coming to see me. You got a B and you're an A student, maybe you'll come. If you're an average student, you get a C, you aren't going to come. But if I give a D or an F, I write myself a note. So when Don shows up at my door, I can say, oh, Don, you remember when I told you to do X, and Y, and you didn't do it? That's why you. So I would just say to us, if we're giving somebody a low score, collectively as the three people in the group, have a statement somewhere. I don't think we should put it on the staff to have to justify, because they didn't give the score. We gave the score. So I don't know what the cutoff should be, because if somebody asks me, why did you give me this? I want to be able to say, well, in category A, which is 40 points, I gave you 30. Category 2, which is 30 points, I gave you 20. And then this, and this, and that's how you got your score. And then they'll be sad.
Notes, Herman, of all that, and that's why you have staff in every meeting, because we keep notes of why, and that's why we've come back to some groups to say, oh, you know, your group seems like it's a little harsh and it's not consistent with other groups in certain categories. That's why some of the groups are having additional meetings.
Yep. So my group is having an additional meeting.
Yeah, well, we did too, Herman, and your point is a good one, Rich. As are the 2 points that you made. And I guess, like, this is, again, the shortcoming of like a numeric model, because it presumes that there is some sort of numeric exactitude here for everybody. And I just sort of believe that is a sort of a fallacious, principle. But, Kim mentioned she didn't really focus on budgets. And it was something that I did I looked at. And I looked at it in the context of the other HP grants that we're now doing all these budget revisions for on the basis of COVID. And I wondered, like, why are we being charged $15,000 for space? Like, if you're hiring new people, why am I spending money on rent? And that to me, like, went to the proposal quality. Now, I don't know, like, to tie these last 2 points together from Rich and Herman, like, I don't know that every group did that or every committee member did that. And to me, if they didn't, were the proposals that I read like more harshly judged than others? And I think, potentially they might have been in that regard. Similarly, somebody else might have been looking for a particular feature or element I wasn't, and that might have caused them to grade somebody up or down in a way that I didn't. So it isn't, I think, just built into the system or baked into the cake of these siloed groups. We're going to have that issue. I will say that, to me, Duan, I really want to underscore this point. I considered our subcommittee's scoring to be a placeholder until I hear from the full group about where everybody's. I was using the full meeting where we're going to talk about the full set of proposals to calibrate my own set of scores. So I just want to
Yeah,
I think that's how we definitely understand.
Yeah, if we're all in agreement, then I think that's how we'd like to approach it too. Again, that's a placeholder, a starting point, and you have discretion to modify and advocate with one another to come up with a score that you feel is best. And that happens with bank grants. Sometimes the larger committee does not agree with a particular group, so it's fine.
Juan, I would have benefited, and maybe in the future we could do this, if staff would have taken one at random and in front of all of us, shown us how you would analyze a typical grant proposal. It would have been a good learning lesson and a starting point for me.
Yeah, and I think we tried to do that with the first calibration. What I think if we had to do it over is we should have convened as a larger group to talk about that one. But I have to say with you, even among staff, we're not in agreement with how we review a grant application. There's variation just as there is at the committee level. Chris's analysis, how he does reviews, is very in line with Dan, but it's not how I do it. I review the budgets, but I bifurcate what I think of the budget, their budgeting, with the quality of their proposal. Because for me, philosophically, I feel like I can provide technical assistance to programs in terms of budgeting. If, say, we don't agree with the space, I feel like I could work with program and we shouldn't penalize them. But that's a policy philosophical question, right? So even at the staff level, there, to be honest, there's not always consistency. But I think closer to it once we do another iteration of this. And I think this goes back to Jim's point that with rubrics, it's going to take some iterations because obviously we're there's much to be improved. But yeah, Rich, I think next time around we should take one and come back as a group and talk it through.
Yeah.
Process.
Yes.
And to answer one of Rich's points, we find this happening all the time with the Department of Justice and National Institute of Justice, that grants that come from Stanford or the Rand Institute or the Urban Institute always have a higher chance of getting funded as opposed to a junior faculty member at UCI. What happens though is when you don't get it, you go to the staff and find out, why was I graded down on this point, that point? And the next time around, you address those issues. So eventually you get to the point where your odds are much better. It's a learning thing for the grantee, and bigger grantees are always going to have more experience and more longevity in these areas.
Yeah.
So I just want to follow up on that because that is a concern. The assumption that because it's a program that has always received funding and it's a larger program, that it should automatically receive a grant. And our example with the bank grants, where the 3 support centers wrote a really poor proposal, was evidence that we didn't just automatically give them bank grant funding because of who they were and their great track record. They didn't deserve funding because it was a very poorly written grant that had just been passed off to an administrative person who, didn't know any substance. So, and I was actually heartened by the fact that we didn't just give them funding based on their reputation. I mean, we got pushback on it, but I think I later had a conversation with one of the support centers who said, yeah, it was a really bad proposal because one of our partners just said, you know, oh, let's just slap this thing together and put down what we always do. And so, you know, I think that was an example of analysis and review where it was done with a lot of integrity. We didn't just rely on past reputation, and we were able to defend it.
But I think also going back to Rich's point, that there are programs that have a winning formula and they know that. And
Yep.
because they write a beautiful proposal,
Yep.
we have our biases, we read that. And so I don't know what we can do as a commission in order to, you know, what we can bring in terms of training or what we can do to kind of address that. I mean, I know the staff is really conscious of that, and I hope we are able to provide you with some additional perspectives and from our vantage point. But it's yeah, I just don't know what to do with that, Rich. I mean, to go to your point.
Sorry.
Back to you, Chris.
Yeah, so, you know, my final thought, unless others have comments, is that I do think the rubric provides an opportunity to address Rich's point about, and Jim and Kim about this. And Kim Bartleson also mentioned this in our partnership grant application. I think ultimately we can only sort of contend with what we're presented with. So if there's a lousy program application due to a lack of capacity at a program, we have to sort of judge the quality of the application that's in front of us. And it's just an intractable problem that programs with more capacity are going to be slick and polished. However, I do think the rubric can be used as a sword in this respect, or a shield, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it, because you can identify ways in which sort of comers, you know, scrappy newcomers are privileged through a numeric scoring system. And we attempted to do this with one of the programs that we had, which really did, I thought, not address in the clearest terms what they were going to be doing, but they did identify the community that they were going out to serve. And we decided that the organizational capacity might be appropriately graded down based on the quality of the application, but we gave them high marks for the proposal because of what they were going to do. That really requires you to see through and see beyond the spit and polish. And a rubric, I think, can be used to deploy that sort of systemic bias. And so that is something that I think we can kind of keep an eye on as we do this. So as always, appreciate everybody's insight, hard work on this, thoughtfulness, and that includes the really hard work of staff to sort of execute on this on such a short timeline. So anybody else? Herman, I see one more thing.
Don, what is the total dollar amount that is being given away?
I believe it's 7.3 or 7.4 to give out.
And what's the number of requests that you have?
39 million.
What's the number of proposals submitted?
39 for 39 million.
39 million proposals?
39 proposals requesting $39 million, and we have 7.3 or 7.4. I can't remember.
Oh, okay, 30. Okay, all right.
Herman, the next meeting is going to be quite long. You only have 38,937 proposals to get through.
Okay, all right. That's my question. Okay.
All right. Anything further? Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Christine, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make one quick point for our record. I skipped over Brady during our initial roll call, and I see that he was here. So I just want to note for the record that Brady attended this meeting as well.
Okay.
I think that's all for me.
Okay.
Well,
Thank
have
you,
a happy
team.
holidays. Happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully you guys can get the full 4 days off.
You too.
Stay safe, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So Christine, are we staying on?